Welcome to the Max Future Weekly Podcast. All Apple talk and no chit chat.
Okay, welcome to the Apple Podcast. This is episode 93, and today is October 14th, Friday. And it's a big day in Apple land. A lot of stuff has happened this week. A lot of upgrades, a lot of devices, a lot of software. So let's get to it. This is a chit-chat-free podcast all about Apple stuff. Here we go. Okay, so the big news this week is that on Wednesday, the 12th, Apple finally released iOS 5. And Apple released it 2 days before the iPhone 4S was delivered to people who pre-ordered it and people who stood in line on Friday. That's today. But iOS 5 was released 2 days early so that, the servers that Apple has to deliver this operating system would not be over-flooded. But they were over-flooded. It took quite a while. When I got home on the end of the day on Wednesday and started trying to download it through iTunes, and I got these errors like 30002 error. And then some sites pointed out that the way to get it was to go directly to Apple's website, download it. But even then, I had difficulty upgrading my wife's iPhone 4 and my iPhone 4 to iOS 5, because even after I downloaded the operating system file for iOS 5, and iTunes still had to connect to Apple's servers to, I guess, authenticate it or to do bless it. And the servers were too busy. So pretty much, Wednesday, I tried various attempts to do it. And then I sort of woke up late Wednesday night and the activation worked, because I guess there was just such a flood of people. But in addition to that, downloading iOS 5, Apple released an upgrade to Lion, which allowed Lion to work with iCloud, because iCloud, the website, finally went active also on Wednesday. And in addition to that, Apple released an upgrade to the Apple TV. So all sorts of upgrades were coming. So let's briefly discuss, iOS 5. I mean, iOS 5, the big thing is, that you're going to have things like notification center that drops down, over the device's window and has like a unified place where you can put whatever notifications you want in one place. So that's a big upgrade to iOS 5. Another upgrade that's just tremendous is that you have, in the iPad version of iOS 5 in Safari, you now have tabs and you have a reading list. Now the iPhone version of Safari does not have tabs, I guess because the screen's too small, but you do have a reading list. You can now save any, like when you go to the save arrow, when you go to that arrow when you're on a website that gives you the choices to add a bookmark or add to home screen or mail a link to this page or print. Well, now there's two additional choices. One choice is to add to reading list, and another choice is to tweet. Now, adding to reading list it's basically like a reading list where you go to your bookmarks. Now, if you go to the root level of your bookmarks, there is now the first thing you see is reading list. And if you click that, you've got a list of websites that are, or stories that you added to your reading list. So that's a big improvement. It's sort of like Instapaper. The other thing that's a huge improvement, I think, in both the iPad and iPhone in Safari is that you can see sort of just text of a story. So let me just pick a story. Let's see, I'm on Engadget's website, and then you'll see there's like a little in the address bar of Safari. There's like a little button if you go onto a story that Reader works with, and if you press the Reader button, you get this beautiful overlay of the website that really essentially formats it in text that it's much easier to see. And this is particularly good in the iPhone. And you can take that overlay of text and you can add it to the reading list, or you can mail it. So if you mail it, you get the link, and that beautifully formatted text is deposited in your email. So this reading function really makes it much easier to read websites and read web articles on your iPhone as well as your iPad. So this is a huge improvement. The other thing that's huge in, there's so many things that are great in iOS 5, is that in the settings, you now have Twitter. And so if you go to, I think it's General, and no, is it General? Well, if you go under your Apple settings, you now have Twitter under Mail, Contacts, and Calendar. And so you can log into you can actually add various Twitter accounts. But let's say you put one in there, and then the Twitter function, tweeting, becomes like a function similar to emailing. So for example, in the Safari browser now, when you press that arrow, you can say tweet, and an interface will show up, and you can write something, and you can send the link that you're on in Safari as a tweet. And so I'm going to write, test tweet, and let's see if it goes, and there it goes. So now, tweeting becomes much more useful because it's going to be built into the OS, and a lot of apps can take advantage of it. So that's really cool. There's so many things now in the photo app. You can now, if you sign up for iCloud, you now have Photo Stream. And it says here, with Photo Stream, your photos are automatically available on all your iCloud devices. You can turn on Photo Stream in settings. I'm going to say later. So I'm going to just pick I'm going to pick a picture here. And now when you edit the picture, you can crop, which is really cool. It gives you like a matrix in thirds, and I guess it's chopped up into 9 parts, and you can just crop photos. Before you couldn't do that. You can also constrain it, and it gives you a choice of constraining it as an original and square, 3x2, 3x5, 4x3, 4x6, 5x7, 8x10, 16x9. So you've got a lot of choices now for cropping within the Photos app. You can also fix the photo with auto enhance, and you can also get rid of red eye, and you can also rotate. Now for me, this was a huge improvement because I was exporting my photos to like another app, like Adobe had a photo editing app. So that's huge. Let's see what else is huge. In the camera app now, you can, let's see the options. You can have a grid mode in your camera app if you want to focus better, and you can have HDR mode on. And you can also, I guess, zoom and such. So you have more choices now in your camera and video app. So there's all sorts of great upgrades. I guess one of the most significant things, though, however, is that you can choose to make your iPhone now independent of any computer, because now you don't have to activate, once you have iOS 5 on it, you don't have to activate through iTunes. So, and you can also back up not to a computer but to iCloud. And Apple gives you a free iCloud account. And basically iCloud is going to replace Mobile Me. And this is another thing that was kind of a little frustrating on Wednesday the 12th, which is iCloud became available, and you were prompted to, if you wanted to migrate your Mobile Me account. Now, for anybody can get a free iCloud account, and you get 5 gigabytes of storage for free. And I suggest you do it because then you can back up your iPhone or iPad to iCloud, and that means back up your settings, back up your documents or data that's on your iPhone. So you don't need a computer. So this is huge. Well, in migrating to iCloud, Apple, if you already are paying for a Mobile Me account, they're giving you until next summer free automatically 25 gigabytes of storage on iCloud, which is a lot. But the thing is, the migration at first didn't work. You have to basically click some boxes on the iCloud website and say that you want your current Mobile Me account to migrate. You put in your Mobile Me email and your password, and it asks you, are your other devices working, ready to accept iCloud? Do they have iOS 5? Now on a Mac, iCloud will only work with Lion. So if you have Snow Leopard, it will not work with iCloud. And if you migrate your Mobile Me to iCloud and you have Snow Leopard, you won't be able to access iCloud, which means you'll have to pay like $29 or something like that to upgrade to Lion. And I think it's worth it. I really like Lion. I know some people are critical of it, but I think it's a great program. So at first, I tried this for hours and hours, and it took me till the next day, actually it took me 2 days. It wasn't until the 14th, because every time I tried to migrate, it said too busy or something like that. So I think Apple was overrun by people migrating from Mobile Me to iCloud. And, I think people were just sort of shocked by their inability. And I was writing tweets like, oh, Steve Jobs is probably all pissed off in heaven, that things are not going smoothly with this transition. Apple seems to always have a trouble when it comes to large scale web activities like servers, activating stuff. So, there was a lot going on, and it was a very busy day on Wednesday getting all this stuff downloaded. Let's move on to another subject. Okay, so the other thing that Apple updated on Wednesday, the 12th, is an update to Apple TV version 4.4. And what this added was Photo Stream and other services like you can get NHL Hockey League and Wall Street Journal Live, and also a Trailers app. And also AirPlay mirroring was enabled on the Apple TV. So let's talk about these things. So photo streaming is part of iCloud, and here's a cool feature in iOS 5 on your iPhone or iPad. Basically, if you take a photo now and you enable iCloud on your iPhone or iPad, and it'll stream the photos you take to iCloud, and then that'll be sent automatically to iPhoto on your Mac or to your Apple TV. That's the other thing. You had to download a new version of iPhoto. Now, one frustrating thing is it doesn't look like Aperture is yet enabled to work with photo streaming. Now, I haven't tested this out, and this is a little frustrating because Apple released last year or dropped the price of Aperture significantly, under $100. I think it's like $50 or something, and Aperture doesn't work with photo streaming, which is frustrating for me because I'm using mainly Aperture now, and I migrated most of my photos to Aperture. But basically, this photo streaming service is going to be pretty amazing because basically you're going to be able to take photos, and you don't have to then connect your iPhone or iPad to your Mac and then sync the photos to Apple TV. Instead, it's just going to go from your iOS device to iCloud, then to your Mac and to your Apple TV. Now, I guess what you should then do is edit your photos in iPhoto, and I wonder, and I haven't tested this out, what happens if it goes automatically. Let's say you haven't edited your photos yet, and then later on you edit them. Will all the edits then appear on your Apple TV and your Macintosh or computer? So I don't know, but this is going to make Apple TV much more interesting. Certainly, AirPlay mirroring is great because now what this means is if you have an iOS device like your iPhone or your iPad, you're going to be able to mirror. Actually, I'm not sure if it works with the iPhone, but it definitely works with the iPad 2, which is if you're on the same Wi-Fi network as your Apple TV, you're going to be able to mirror whatever's on your iPad 2 to your Apple TV. So this is huge stuff. But it looks like Apple also is releasing more apps. Now remember, we have the Netflix app, we have the baseball and the basketball app on the Apple TV, and now we have, and of course iTunes, but now we have also National Hockey League, the Wall Street Journal Live, and trailers. So they're adding more content apps to the Apple TV. But frankly, if you can mirror anything from your iPad to your Apple TV, essentially all your apps on your iPad 2 are essentially apps on your Apple TV, because essentially, it's the same thing. What's the difference? If you can run it from your iPad to the Apple TV, then to your big screen TV, isn't it almost the same as having it on your Apple TV? So this is pretty cool stuff. The Apple TV update is definitely worthwhile. Now, the other thing that happened midweek on Wednesday the 12th is really all the reviews started coming out for the iPhone 4S. That includes reviews by Daring Fireballs, John Gruber, The Macworld, This Is My Next. Also, all the major reviewers, Walt Mossberg, Wall Street Journal. And here's the thing. I feel vindicated. Because if you recall, last week I wrote a post about how Steve Jobs had died the day after Apple entered the fourth paradigm of computing. And my point was that Apple announced the day before Steve Jobs died on October 4th that the iPhone 4S would have this Siri voice recognition function, and that this was the future of computing, that we're entering the fourth paradigm, which is artificial intelligence and voice recognition. In other words, the first paradigm being the object, the first paradigm being the personal computer, which Apple pioneered. The second paradigm being the Macintosh, giving us the graphical user interface and a mouse, which made it easier for everyday people to compute. And then the third paradigm being obviously the introduction of the iPhone and iPad with touch computing. And a lot of people, when I wrote that article, weren't pointing that out, weren't saying this was a huge thing. They were like, oh, some speech recognition is interesting, but how great is it? But here's the thing: almost every reviewer who reviewed the iPhone 4S has been blown away by this Siri function that's in the iPhone 4S. All of them say it's amazing. Now, Jason Snell of Macworld had basically a review, a video showing the use of Siri. And the thing that's wild about Siri is like you're having a conversation with your iPhone 4S. Now, it doesn't yet work with iPhone 4. We don't know if it'll ever work with iPhone 4 or iPad 2 or the first iPad, but it could in the future. And people will go into the reasons why maybe it's limited to the iPhone 4S. But everyone who's played around with it is blown away by it, because you can ask all sorts of questions and it talks back to you and types up what you said and gives you an answer. So John Gruber had a little review, and this is what he said. He said, Siri feels like old school Apple, Newton-esque, at least in spirit. Scully-era Apple was obsessed with this sort of thing, natural language processing, the computer as digital assistant, new models of human-computer interaction, AI that works naturally. Even the startups from former Apple employees of that era worked on this sort of thing. Remember General Magic? So his point is that it works really well. Yes, there's some like mistakes occasionally, but it works. This is what John Gruber says. He goes, on a whim, I asked Siri with no other context, when is my next haircut? Siri answered with my appointment scheduled for later this month. I asked, when was my last haircut? And it found that appointment from a month ago. I told Siri, play something by the Rolling Stones, and it played a random Stones song, Gimme Shelter, from Let It Bleed. I interrupted and said, play some Girls by the Rolling Stones, and Siri played just that song. And he goes on to say he was running an errand, and he said, he asked Siri while he's walking down the street, remind me to fix Amy's glasses when I get home. Half an hour later, within a door of our house, the reminder went off. Because, we'll go into that also. One of the features of iOS 5 is that you now have this Reminders app. And the Reminders app can remind you based on location. And apparently Siri works with that. So Siri's in the operating system, and basically all the reviewers are saying this is like mind-blowing stuff. Now, it's not working perfectly, but it works well. And we had voice recognition before, but apparently this is really good voice recognition. And the thing is, you're having a conversation back and forth. So all the reviews are glowing, and also people are glowing about the camera, because the camera is 8 megapixel, but it has additional optics, so it can take better pictures in low light. It also can shoot video in 1080p, and so the video is already better. And people say it runs faster because the processor, there's already benchmarks that show that the processor's running, they're getting speeds of like 68%, 70% faster than the iPhone 4 on processes. And also the video graphics is 7 times faster. So all of the reviews are glowing, and people are mainly blown away by the Siri app, but all this other technology is really good too. And the thing is, I think the camera upgrade alone is reason enough to get the iPhone 4S, because I pointed this out. I take a lot of pictures with my iPhone, and having a better camera is worth the upgrade. Now, I couldn't get the full subsidy from AT&T because I wasn't spending enough per month, and so AT&T was only giving me a partial upgrade. And so altogether, I think with tax, I'm paying close to $600 for a 32 gigabyte iPhone 4S. And if it had been subsidized, I'd be probably paying something like $350, not $600. But the thing is, I can sell my iPhone 4 which still has value, and it's off contract when I sell it for somewhere between $300 and $400. So it's only going to cost me somewhere between $300 and $200 to really upgrade to the iPhone 4S. So to me, it's worth it for a couple of $100, getting a much more powerful phone. It has a much better camera, speedier, because this is like a computer, and then also has this incredibly advanced technology with the voice recognition. So to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. It was worth doing that upgrade. Now, one thing that the iPhone 4S does not have is an upgrade to the amount of RAM in the iPhone 4S. People in midweek, I think iFixit had already done a teardown of the iPhone 4S and determined that it still has 512 megabytes of RAM, the same as the iPhone 4. And some people are disappointed, but other people pointed out that there may be a significant reason why Apple did not want to upgrade the RAM to 1 gigabyte. And here's why. Apparently, John Gruber of Daring Fireball highlighted this in one of his posts. He saw something in a blog post by the head Windows developer for Microsoft, Steven Sinofsky. And Steven Sinofsky, in talking about Windows 8, which is also going to be a tablet operating system as well as a PC, said this. Sinofsky said, something that might not be obvious is that minimizing memory usage on low-power platforms can prolong battery life. In any PC, RAM is constantly consuming power. If an OS uses a lot of memory, it can force device manufacturers to include more physical RAM. The more RAM you have on board, the more power it uses, the less battery life you get. Having additional RAM on a tablet device can, in some instances, shave days off of the amount of time the tablet can sit on your coffee table, looking off but staying fresh and up to date. So that's really interesting. So it could be that Apple decided not to go to 1 gigabyte of RAM because it wants to prolong the battery life of the iPhone 4S. Now remember, battery life for these mobile devices is crucial. I mean, I think battery life is one of the big features that customers look for. They want their battery to last as long as possible. In fact, the iPads, one of its big selling points is that the battery lasts an enormous amount of time. You could use the iPad heavily for 10 hours and it barely goes down. Now, here's what's interesting. I have an 11-inch MacBook Air, and that has 4 gigabytes of RAM, and I have an iPad 2. And now my MacBook Air, the battery life is really short. I mean, it feels like when I'm using the MacBook Air, it feels like the battery sign goes down as I'm using it. I can see the battery usage just drain away. While on my iPad, it's not. So I wonder to what extent that the MacBook Air's battery doesn't last that long is because I have 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is 8 times more RAM than in my iPad 2. And I wonder, I would love for somebody to do a test comparing a MacBook Air with only 2 gigabytes of RAM, put it head to head with one that has 4 gigabytes and see how long the battery lasts. So that's a significant point. When a company like Apple makes these devices, it has to balance so many things. I mean, on one hand, you want power. On the other hand, you want battery life. On one hand, you want power. On the other hand, you want compact, light devices. And it's really an engineering marvel that Apple's been able to pull off, these incredible devices. So anyways, I thought that was a really thought-provoking post by Sinofsky, which came to my attention via John Gruber of Daring Fireball. Okay, so as I'm doing this podcast, I remember there's some other features of iOS 5 that I think are just fantastic that I forgot to mention. That I think is truly groundbreaking. And I upgraded my iPhone 4, which I'm going to eventually sell, because I'm still waiting for my iPhone 4S, which is slated to arrive today. In fact, it did arrive. I just didn't open it yet, and maybe at the end of this podcast I'll open it and play with it. But here's one thing that works on iPhone 5 and works on iPhone 4 and works on any iOS device, and that's the new Messages Center. And this is really incredible because the Messages is where you can text people. But the thing is, now you have iMessages, and to me this is huge because basically it bypasses the carriers. Here it's bypassing AT&T and allows me to send text messages to anyone else who has iOS 5 on an iOS device. So, for example, I can text my wife as an iMessage, and the beauty of it is it looks just like a text. You can attach photos or video, I guess, or anything like you would into an MMS text, but it's not going through the carrier as a text, so you're not charged for it. And it recognizes like a phone number. So if I put in a phone, I tested this with a friend who just got an iPhone 4S, and I gave him my phone number, and it automatically knew that it could send it as an iMessage. Now, why is this huge? Because AT&T, Verizon, and not Sprint, but AT&T and Verizon charge extra on top of a plan for texting, and I've always been against that. I think it's horrible, and I'm so against it. Maybe because I'm cheap, but for years now I've instructed AT&T to block the text ports in my phone. So I've had the Messages app on my iPhone for years, but I haven't been able to receive any texts except like texts from AT&T. And I did that because AT&T was charging me for unsolicited texts. So some people were sending me text I didn't want texts, and AT&T was charging me like 10 cents or 25 cents a text or something like that. And to me, that's just like crazy. I mean, why is a text 10 cents? It's like hardly any data. It seems crazy that I can send an email for free digitally, but I have to pay for a text. I mean, on my iPhone, I can tweet for free, which is like a message, or email, but texting, AT&T charges extra. To me, it's a form of consumer abuse, by AT&T and Verizon. Well, Apple's totally changing the landscape because iMessages now allows you to seamlessly send an iMessage instead of a text. So here's how it works. Let's say you normally text your friend, and let's say you were going to send a text to your friend, and you open the Messages app and you send a text. But let's say it just happens that your friend also has an iOS device with iOS 5 on it. Well, it's going to prompt you to say, well, do you want to send this as an iMessage instead of a regular text? And you're going to say yes because it's free. And here's the thing. If you're mainly texting friends and family that have iOS devices, you should really think about just dumping any text plan, shutting it off, and only using iMessages. See, in my case, I mean, the main person I'm going to be texting back and forth is my wife, and instead of emailing. So to me, this is like revolutionary. Okay, so other cool features. Now, the website macstories.net /tutorial/iOS 5 tips, tricks, and hidden features points out some other great things in iOS 5 that I didn't mention. One thing, if you go into general settings under accessibility, now you have the ability to assign unique vibration patterns to people and contacts. So this is huge because you can now, you turn that on, and then after you turn that on, if you go into your contacts on your iPhone or your iPad and you edit your contacts, you have now the choice to assign a custom vibration. Now, here's how it works. So you first go into general settings under accessibility, click on for custom vibrations. Then go to your contacts and pick a contact, and you click edit. Now when you click edit and scroll down, you will see like a field called vibration, and it currently says default. But if you click on that, it gives you a choice. You can select one of 5 standard vibrations: alert, heartbeat, rapid, SOS, and symphony. But here's the really cool part. You can create a custom new vibration. So you select that, and you get this recording screen where you can tap to create a vibration pattern. So let's say I go tap, 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 and then stop. You'll see at the bottom, as it recorded, that there are these little taps that reflect your vibration. Now, I don't know if you can pick this up, but I'm gonna play it, and I get this unique tapping. And the beauty of this is, let's say you're in meetings a lot and you rely on the vibration to know who's calling. Well, you can assign vibrations. Like, let's say you want a vibration because your mother is calling who's elderly. Well, you might want to know that when you're in a meeting, as opposed to, a call from a friend or a call from your wife or a spouse. So this is really nifty stuff. Very cool. Another truly cool feature is if you go now in iOS 5 to keyboard, if you click keyboard, there's now a field called shortcuts. And you can create shortcuts for typing anywhere, I guess, in the iOS. So right now, the default shortcut is OMW for on my way, exclamation. But all you have to do is create a new one. So let's see, how are we going to do that? Oh yeah, you go add new shortcut. So you can have a phrase, wow, that is great. So I created that phrase, and in the shortcut, I'm going to make it be XWW, and I'm going to save it. So then, if I go, let's try this. I'll go into write an email, and I'll type XWW, WW. The little pop-up window that's like a spelling corrector or a word anticipator says, wow, that is great. And I just press space, and it's there. So this is sort of like Text Expander. There's an app on the Mac, and there's also an app on the iPhone called Text Expander. But the problem with Text Expander is that Apple doesn't give it access to the entire operating system. But this shortcut thing would be in the entire operating system. So, it's pretty cool. Like, I'm going to experiment to see, maybe I could create a shortcut for a really complicated login that I use, and then just type that. Although that might be a security danger. So that's another cool feature. You can now open the camera app from the lock screen, which is huge. You can take a picture using Apple's headphone remote. You could take a video before with the headphone remote, but now you can take a picture with it. You can swipe left to the camera roll right from taking a picture. Now you can also have split keyboard for the iPad. That's really cool. And now you also have built-in emoji keyboard, so you don't have to use a third-party app to unlock it. So this is kind of cool. You go to General Keyboard, and under International Keyboards, you add New Keyboard, and you look for emoji, and that's it. You have that. You can also create custom tones for emails, tweets, calendar events, and much more. So you just go, I guess you can have, like an alert tone for like a tweet coming in or a calendar alert. So that's kind of cool. And you can buy additional tones from the iTunes Tone Store. So, I mean, it's amazing now what's in iOS 5. I think I'm going to try to do a whole show just on iOS 5 because it's so rich. Okay, so then let's talk about today, which is launch day for the iPhone 4S. Now, for me personally, this year I decided not to wait in line because I pre-ordered last Friday through Apple, and it was going to be delivered. And to me, what's cool, I just love the way Apple does it. First, I was a little anxious because I didn't receive a notification from Apple that it was shipping, I think, until Wednesday, which was late. And I was reading on the internet, like other people were getting shipment notifications earlier. And so I got a shipment notification, and you get a UPS tracking number. And frankly, it feels like you're watching Santa Claus come to your house from the North Pole, because UPS, shows the tracking. And first, it left China and went to Hong Kong. And then from Hong Kong, it went to Alaska. And then from Alaska, it went to, I think it was Kentucky. And then from Kentucky to New Jersey. And then finally, today, it said it was out for shipment or for delivery. And then I got it like this afternoon. So I decided not to wait in line. But I went by the Fifth Avenue Apple store in Manhattan this morning, and shortly after it opened, and the line wasn't crazy. Like for the iPad 2, the line went all around the block, and it's a huge block in New York. And here, when I got there, like at 8:20 or 8:30, and the store opened at 8, the line, was still out in front, and it winded a bit, but it wasn't like crazy. But on the internet, it looks like there were significant lines around the world. And I think one of the coolest things that I saw was that Steve Wozniak waited in line overnight in a store in Silicon Valley in Los Gatos, California. And if you go to cultofmac.com, you can see a picture of him. And he actually stood in line overnight. He was the first person in line. He had like a chair. And this is the co-founder of Apple. So it's amazing. And there's a picture of him buying 2 iPhone 4S's. And I guess his wife is there too with him. And I guess he told some people that were interviewing him that he thought this was such a very significant event, particularly the Siri integration in iOS 4S. So, it looks like Apple is just going to have incredible record number of iPhone 4S sales, and Apple's just going to have a blowout quarter. Literally, Apple's stock price in the last few days has been soaring. And, I think this afternoon, it's already at like $421. So it's hovering around its all-time high of $422. So, I think Apple just has a home run here with the iPhone 4S. Doesn't have a different body. Now, here's one little tip. The iPhone 4S's body looks exactly like the iPhone 4, except here's a little tip. It's one iPhone 4S that works on all the carriers, and it has an antenna that works with all the carriers. But the body is actually identical in shape and where the buttons are to the Verizon iPhone 4. And the Verizon iPhone 4 is slightly different than the AT&T iPhone 4, and that because the antenna's on top and there's a little band there, the sound, the mute button on the left-hand side of the Verizon iPhone 4 is a little lower than the one on the AT&T. What this means is if you want to use an iPhone 4 case for the iPhone 4S, make sure you get one that was built for the Verizon iPhone, because then you'll make sure that the little hole for the button works for that. So that's an important tip. Now, I tried to go in and buy some cases from the Apple store this morning, but they weren't letting anybody in except to buy the iPhone, I guess, up until either 9 or 10 o'clock. I think till 10 o'clock. So I still don't have a case, and I'd like to get a case. I ordered the white iPhone 4S. Now, iOS 5 may cause a problem for some apps because of a new sandboxing requirement that Apple has in iOS 5. And sandboxing, I guess, is saying that, that apps can only have access to certain files and information on a device, which also makes it more secure. Now, the developer Marco Arment, who's got a blog called marco.org, had a very interesting post yesterday, October 13, entitled Cleaning. And he says this is going to be a problem. And he says that Apple has a new system on how to deal with caches or temporary directories. And he's basically saying that certain apps that sort of store information, like a pod catching app, or even Instapaper, which stores stories from online to later reading, they may be compromised and you might not be able to recover certain files. And so this is what he says. He says every iOS app has its own home directory where it can store files. Every file and directory that an app puts there, except anything in a caches or a TMP directory, gets backed up when you sync your device to iTunes. He says prior to iOS 5, the system never deleted the contents of caches and TMP, so they were safe places for apps to put data that should always be available but could be re-downloaded if the user did a complete restore or otherwise lost old data, and therefore shouldn't be taking up space in backups and slowing down syncs. He goes on to say in iOS 5, since iCloud backups are now possible, Apple has started cracking down on apps that store too much in any backed up directories, such as documents. Many developers have recently received emails from Apple like this. And he lists an email. In recent testing, it appears that your app stores a fair amount of data in its document folder. Since iCloud backups are performed daily over Wi-Fi for each user's iOS device, it's important to ensure the best possible user experience by minimizing the amount of data being stored by your app. In addition to purchased music, apps, books, camera roll, and device settings, everything in your app's home directory, including its documents folder, is backed up to iCloud. Then it goes on to say data stored in the application bundle itself, the caches directory, and the temp directory is not backed up to iCloud. Your app should store data in these locations according to iCloud data storage guidelines. And the guidelines basically say only documents and other data that is user generated or that cannot otherwise be recreated by your application should be stored in the documents directory and will be automatically backed up to iCloud. And he goes on to say data that can be downloaded again or regenerated should be stored in the caches directory. And it goes on to say examples of files you should put in the caches directory include database cache files and downloadable content. Now, what Armand said is that this could be a problem. He goes, Instapaper has stored in its downloaded articles in caches for years, and he said that he didn't want to slow down iTunes syncing or enlarge their backups unnecessarily, and full restores don't happen often enough for it to be a problem for most people. He says this new policy now locks Instapaper into using caches, and he no longer has a choice. But he says that in iOS 5, caches and TMP files are cleaned out when the device is low on space. So things could sort of disappear. So he basically is saying that some apps like Instapaper could have things randomly deleted. He says Instapaper and anything that saves web articles for offline reading could have stuff in like deleted. He says that ebook and comic book apps or podcast clients or offline Wikipedia apps or offline mapping programs. And so he says that this could be a big problem. And he gives it a scenario. He says, here's a common scenario. An Instapaper customer is stocking up an iPad for a long flight. She syncs a bunch of movies and podcasts, downloads some magazines, and buys a few new games, leaving very little free space. Right before boarding, she remembers to download the newest issue of The Economist. And then he goes on to say, this causes free space to fall below the threshold that triggers the cleaner, which in the background, unbeknownst to her, deletes everything that was saved in Instapaper. Later in the flight, with no internet connectivity, she goes to launch Instapaper and finds it completely empty. So this sounds pretty bad. I'm not sure how serious this is, but what Armand is basically saying is that Apple's changed the way apps can store data and that they may be deleted and disappeared. So anyways, I hope Apple addresses this and fixes it, because I do like the fact that certain apps can store data. On the other hand, I don't want to permanently back up all the data. For example, I use Time Machine on a Mac, and in Time Machine you can exclude certain folders from backing up because you don't really want incremental backups of everything on your computer. Your Time Machine hard drive will overflow very quickly. So for example, in Time Machine, exclude your downloads folder, because do you really want to back up incrementally all your downloads? You're constantly downloading stuff. Similarly, I don't back up my podcast folder in iTunes because, these podcasts are available in iTunes. Why do I want to back up, podcasts? Because I'm constantly listening to podcasts, downloading them, and then I'm not interested in it anymore. So I really don't need to have all my podcasts that I listen to go back, in time and recover something from a long time ago. And also, those files are pretty big. So to the extent iCloud's going to be a backup for your iDevice, I assume eventually Apple is going to implement a feature like Time Machine on a Mac where you can exclude certain things from being backed up. On the other hand, Apple doesn't want the user to have to deal with all these permutations and exceptions. So maybe Apple will find a compromise that will satisfy a developer like Marco Arment. Let's hope that happens. Okay, so one of the more interesting articles that came out this week sort of shed some light on some of the people who are still at Apple and who are going to continue to have a major influence, particularly since Steve Jobs is no longer here and has passed away. And one of those individuals is Scott Forstall, who's in charge of all iOS devices and software. And the magazine BusinessWeek.com Bloomberg had a very interesting, lengthy piece on Forstall. And basically, Forstall is painted as a really bright guy. He was valedictorian of his high school class, went to Stanford, and was hired, I think, out of Stanford. He was a computer science, person or engineer. But he was hired by Steve Jobs at Next, the company that he had when he was in exile, when Steve Jobs was in exile from Apple. And then Steve took him with him to Apple when he went back to Apple. And what's interesting here, it says that Forstall is very, very competitive and hard driving. And they're basically saying that, to the extent you have to be somewhat, difficult or demanding, to be like Steve Jobs, that Forstall is sort of like this. And they basically say that he may be the reason that this other executive left, who was the head of the iPod development. And they basically say that when Apple was developing the iPhone, there was two competing ways that it could have been done. One way is to just use the sort of simple operating system, the Unix, I guess, based operating system that the iPod had, or take the Macintosh operating system and port that and make it a much more complicated device, which is what ended up happening. Well, here basically saying that Steve Jobs was leaning towards the iPod method, but in the end was, influenced by using the Macintosh operating system on the iPhone, and that basically that this guy butted heads with this other executive who left. And so it's interesting. The guy who left, his name is Tony Fadell. And it's a very interesting article. Tony Fadell, I think, came out and sort of denied that happened, that he left because of that. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, these people sound like they have really hard-driving personalities. It's going to be really interesting to see if Tim Cook has what it takes to keep these executives in line. You've got Johnny Ive, you've got Phil Schiller, and you've got Forstall, and now there's this guy Eddie Q, who I guess is the iTunes guy. So it's going to be interesting. They're all paid a lot of money, but I wonder if these executives are all going to stay. Like Tim Cook's in charge; he's the CEO. But I wonder if to some extent some of them are going to be disappointed that they're not in charge now that Steve's not there. In other words, were they hoping they'd be the next Steve? So that'd be too bad if they left. I mean, they each bring strengths to Apple. Obviously, Steve Jobs was the whole, the person who could just bring it all together. But it's an interesting piece on Forstall. I guess he's in his 40s now. But you might want to check it out. It's at businessweek.com. Just search around for Forstall, Forstall. Okay, so at the end of this podcast, I finally got my iPhone 4S. And if you're looking at the video version of this, I'm showing you like I unboxed it. And the box is nice. It's got a different image than I think the original iPhone 4. You get some icons in there. And, it's beautifully packed again. So it's always nice getting a nice fresh box of an iPhone. It's like, it feels so cool. I mean, so, all right. So I plop it out using my one-handed method. And I got the white version. And, I haven't had a white version since, I guess, the 3G. Originally, I got a black and a white 3G. And the cool thing about the iPhone 4S, unlike any prior iPhone, is you can activate it just by putting it on. Like in the past, if you got an iPhone and you put it on, it would give you this cord sign, and you'd have to plug it into a computer. But not this iPhone 4S. From now on, all iOS devices are going to be independent of computers. So you put it on, and the Apple sign comes on, and it's booting up, and it takes you through a menu of questions. I guess the first question is, the first question is going to be, are you in the United States, or is this English? So, all right, here we go. So, like, if you're looking at the video, it says iPhone, and it's sort of like a plaid background, or just some sort of cloth background. And it, asks you what language you speak. I checked English. and then where are you? I picked United States. And enable location services. I didn't enable the location services. I just didn't want to off the bat do the services. And I logged into one of the Wi-Fi networks, my Wi-Fi network, Planet Lexstar. And then I put my password in and my billing zip code and my social security number for AT&T. It recognized the phone number. So basically it ported over right there, the phone number. I have it on the iPhone 4. And like some people had reported huge activation problems, here when I was activating the phone, it said it would take a few minutes, like 3 minutes. And frankly, it was pretty quick. So earlier in the day, people were having huge delays in activating through AT&T, but not here. Anyway, so then
Siri, what is the capital of the United States?
The Siri app, and here we go. Listen to my Siri recording. This is pretty cool. So I'm going to take you through some Siri questions.
Okay, here goes.
Okay, so it gave me the capital of the United States. Let me try another one. Siri, how many people live in New York City?
Sorry, I'm not sure what you said.
How many people live in New York City? How many people live in New York City?
Checking on that for you. Okay, here you go.
So it gives me the result. 8.175 million people. Siri, make an appointment for me to have a haircut tomorrow at 3 p.m. in the Village.
Okay, when's the appointment?
3 p.m.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
3 p.m. tomorrow. 3 p.m. tomorrow.
Sorry, Alex Cell, I didn't get that.
Siri, what color?
I don't know what you mean by Siri. Okay, when?
When am I going to go to the moon?
Sorry, I don't understand. When am I going to go to the moon? When is your appointment?
My appointment is tomorrow at 3 p.m.
I didn't find any appointments at 3 p.m. About is tomorrow.
Siri, is there a good place to get a cake around here?
I don't know where you are, but you can help me find out. In location services settings, turn on both location services and Siri.
Siri, who is the President of the United States?
Sorry, I missed that.
Who is the President of the United States?
Checking my sources. Okay, here you go.
What is the capital of California?
Let me check that for you. I found this for you.
Okay, so the other thing that's cool about the iPhone 4S is that it's just incredibly zippy and fast. Everything is very responsive. It just, it flies really quickly. Now, the other great thing is the camera. The camera is really great. And I took 2 shots. I think the one on the left you're looking at is with the 4S, and the one on the right is with the 4. And it's you can definitely see better sensitivity in low light, and better clarity. So, this is really cool. Now, one disappointment is, and I think this is the network, I have the AT&T iPhone 4S, and it's supposed to get much faster download speeds, and so theoretically can get much faster download speeds, but I tested it on a speed test thing, and I got like 5 megapixels down, and theoretically I think I'm supposed to get up to 14 megabytes down, so I only got like 4 or 5. So, but anyways, look, I'll have more about the iPhone 4S. I think it's a great device. It's definitely worth having a much zippier processor, better camera, and Siri and voice recognition. It's just a great package. Okay, so that's it for the Apple podcast. This is Lex. Today is October 14th, and this is, a great week. Again, the iPhone 4S came out. iOS 5 was released. All sorts of updates. Thanks for listening. This is a chit-chat-free podcast all about Apple products, Apple things. Any positive reviews on YouTube, on Blip TV, on iTunes will be greatly appreciated. Thanks again, and see you next week.
This has been a Max Future production.